Hello there, it's Thursday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever, the only movie podcast that offers nothing but objective, hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. Universe? Universe. That was the word I was trying to say there. Yes, exactly like that. I'm your host, the podcast with no name, Konrad, and with me as always, he's your Huckleberry, it's Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I'm your Huckleberry Finn. I was about to say you're my Finn, but having said that, Huckleberry Finn is the same person.
I actually don't know if that's what I assume that's what that's referencing. I know it purely from not Unforgiven. Oh God, what's it called? Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday. It's not Wired Up. It's the other one.
Oh yeah, Tombstone.
That's the one. Yeah. That's the. I'm assuming he's referencing Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah.
But that might be after. This is awful. But we're already on a detour.
I don't think Huckleberry Finn was after that, was it? Huckleberry Finn was definitely 1800s.
I don't know when Mark Twain was writing. Let us know in the comments, folks.
He's got a lovely boat at Disneyland. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't joined us to hear us discuss American 19th century literature, you'll be pleased to know that this is a movie diary where we're going to talk about all the movies we've seen since the last time we did one of these, which was a week ago. Next week, Anthony and I have agreed we're going to do a themed episode, a return to form, and that is going to be in honor of the Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong, I might have got that title the wrong way around, trailer that dropped this week. We're going to do monster movies.
Yeah, any excuse really.
Yeah, any excuse to listen to Deeper Underground by Jamiroquai, because that song is a fucking banger. And it's the only good thing about that movie, one might say. But yeah, so we're going to do that next week. But this week is a movie diary. And so if you are new to the show or you're checking us out for the first time, please either subscribe to us on YouTube at The Culture Cave or on podcasting apps or on all the good ones at Best Movie Podcast Ever. Get involved in the I can't speak today. Comments.
That's
the
one
word I was trying to say. Give us a like. Share the show with your friends. But apart from that, I say let's talk about some movies.
Let's do it.
Movies. That's what we're here to talk about. You know the game, and you know how to play it.
I love that's your catchphrase now coming into this section. I love it.
We're just shouting movies and then quoting Triple H's Motorhead theme song for the wrestling fans amongst you.
Yeah,
we've seen some of them. I've only seen actually, to be honest, I have seen slightly more than this week, but I've limited myself because I want to get some good discourse going on the ones I've discussed. So I've got 4 with another honorary mention I want to get out there. How many have you got this week?
I've got 4. And I love the fact that you're giving us the cream. Like we know now, you're giving us the cream of the crop. There's more that you've watched.
Yeah, this is me scooping the cream off the top here. This is just it.
What I love is the people who listen to both of our podcasts, the After Dark podcast and this one, are going to get rewarded now because, they're getting rewarded for this little tidbit of information. Conrad always has way more films watched than me because, as he said on the After Dark podcast, he's usually a movie watcher rather than a TV show watcher, whereas I am an equal opportunities watcher.
I watch no. The most TV I have watched in the last 3 weeks is sitting with my partner while she rewatches the whole of Grey's Anatomy on Amazon Prime. I very rarely watch television, so it's that's why the After Dark podcast is such a commitment for me, and hopefully the listeners appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. So I got 4 watched this week. It isn't the cream of the crop. It's just the milk. It's
just stuff. just milk.
Having said that, I watched a few really, really good films this week. Some debatable, which we'll get into, I'm sure. So I'll go first. My first one...
Yeah, you go first.
...is very topical at the minute. Well, not... Depends what you mean by the word topical, but I came out recently. So it was released on the 20th... It was released on the 29th of January, and that is Simon Stone's The Dig for Netflix. Now, this came out... I thought it came out today. What's the 1st of February when we're recording this? So it's only 2 days old. I actually watched it today, funny enough.
Okay.
Yeah, because I thought it came out today. I was like, oh my god, it's number 1 in the UK. That'd be great. I really want to watch that because I saw trailers for it. I love Carey Mulligan. I don't really think I've seen her in much that I didn't like her in. I loved her in Drive, for example. Ralph Fiennes is in it, and he plays Basil Brown, who is... Now, I love a film like this because, and I'm not going to say you can believe 100% everything's factual, but it is based in truth. And I love basically the idea of it is that it's chronicling the digging up of the site at Sutton Hoo, where they found an Anglo-Saxon boat that was a grave site, which had a load of different treasures and gold and things in there.
I believe it's like the biggest archaeological find in British history.
Yeah, it was a really big deal, to the point where when I used to teach science, like we actually analyzed the scientific methods at which they tested the gold and stuff. So it's
I just want to add a caveat to that to say within the British Isles, because I know the British Empire did a fair bit of archaeology, and not always in the British Isles.
Okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, that's fine. Well, exactly. So actually, in Ireland, there's one called Newgrange, which is a huge place. I'll take you there one day.
Okay.
But
yeah, that'd be cool.
But it's like a tomb. But they didn't really find. I don't think they found like gold and stuff. You know what I mean? So this is a real, like, they had treasures and all they found. And so I'm sure a lot of people, listening to this and before they've seen the film know about the dig. But basically, it's. The tagline is, an archaeologist embarks on a historical important excavation of Sutton Hoo in 1938. Literally as if you're watching a documentary. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get a sense of the premise, to be honest, from the pre-release stuff or the trailers and that.
So the premise is that you follow a widow played by Carey Mulligan called Edith Pretty, and she bought this land with her husband before her husband passed away, with the eye to always digging up these mounds. They thought there might be something under them. You know, when you see a field with a big mound in it, you think there might be something there. So they bought them with this intent. She got Basil Brown involved, who's Ralph Fiennes' character, and he is an untrained. Well, I shouldn't say untrained, but he doesn't have any pieces of paper saying that he can do the job, right?
Okay.
He's not a traditional archaeologist. He calls himself an excavator, and he actuwe
mean he owns a digger, basically.
No. Like he
owns a JCB.
Yeah, it would have been a lot quicker. Let's be honest. Yeah. But he basically has been doing it from a very young age, and he comes in, he starts digging away. But as these discoveries start to come forth, there's bigger powers come into play, and like the British Museum wants to get involved, and Ipswich Museum wants to get involved, and they start like sort of trying to take it away from him. And there's a whole question throughout: is he going to get the credit that he deserves for uncovering these things?
Oh, so it's like an underdog story.
It is like an underdog story, exactly.
Oh, okay. I did not think it was going to be that kind of movie. That makes me a lot more likely to see it, actually.
Yeah, no, it's very good. So basically, Basil Brown, Ralph Fiennes does a fantastic job of playing the character himself. I hesitate to say West Country because I think it's more towards Norfolk. I can't really tell. There's certain accents in England that I can't tell apart, right? It's not full on West Country, but maybe it is. I don't know, right? Anyway, because I know that Ipswich is out near Norwich, right?
Yeah.
So you would imagine
it's
more
in East Anglia.
It's more an East Anglian accent, I would imagine, unless he. See, I don't know. Anyway, it sounded like Hot Fuzz to me, but I know that's where's that? I think that's in the West Country.
Yeah, that's set kind of in Dorset or something, I think.
Anyway, the note I've got here is that he did a better job than Nick Frost in Hot Fuzz.
Okay, great.
But I don't know if that's where he's from, though.
What, Ralph Fiennes?
No, I don't. No. The accent he's doing, I don't know if he's meant to be from the same place as Nick Frost. But
I was
going to say,
like acting school. If he was from there, acting school got that out of Ralph Fiennes pretty quickly. Like, he's a very well spoken man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in terms of like I did enjoy it. I'm going to be honest with you. I enjoyed it as an underdog story. It's one of those films where even a layperson and even someone who doesn't think about it at all could tell that the composition was really considered. Like, for example, when Ralph Fiennes is like riding his bike up a path, he's not in the middle of the screen. He's literally right at the left of the screen. Like one of those, like the cinematographer comes to play. You know what I mean? Like they knew what they wanted to do, and they made it really considered. Everything, every frame was could have been like a painting. Even the grading of it was very, very colorful. Which the advertising would lead you to believe it's very sort of sepia, very brown, but actually, it was full of color, full of life. I was very happy to see Johnny Flynn turn up in this. Yeah,
he's having a good year, Johnny Flynn. I say good year, like good last 12 months with Emma, and then with this
and Stardust as well. He played David
and
Bowie,
Stardust, yeah.
which hasn't been released in the UK, I don't believe. Or maybe it was released, but we didn't get to see it yet. But, yeah, Johnny Flynn, he's one of my favorite musicians. He's also a fantastic actor. I've seen him live on the stage. I just think he's great. And he plays Carey Mulligan's cousin, which I find really interesting because Carey Mulligan's married to Marcus Mumford from Mumford & Sons, and Johnny Flynn and Marcus Mumford like came up in the music industry together, you know? So
it's a big folk circle.
A folkathon. It's a folkathon. But no, the thing's worth checking out. I'm going to be honest with you. It's lovely. It's got, as I mentioned, I love the warm grading of it. I love the composition. It had an interesting sort of editing decision that there would be a scene playing out. A lot of the time, a scene playing out, you'd hear the audio of people talking, but it would be showing something different. Like while Ralph Fiennes is talking to another character, it'd be showing what Carey Mulligan's up to. It also did this interesting, but I actually quite liked this editing choice of while at one particular conversation between Carey Mulligan and Ralph Fiennes, they were talking to each other, but they were showing them in moments of the conversation where they weren't talking to each other. So the audio was them talking to each other. But when you looked at their faces, they weren't actually speaking. They were just looking at each other.
It's quite a like kind of classic way of conveying maybe a slightly either thoughtful or awkward conversation by almost doing the audio from the conversation in voiceover of them not speaking to each other. It's always good fun when they do that.
Yeah, exactly. But the score's lovely, very piano centric. Also like orchestral with the piano being the center of it. Very somber tone in parts, to be quite honest with you. It's on the eve of World War II. There's like sort of a ticking clock to when the war will start, because they're all saying we have to get this out of the ground soon, because once the war starts, then we'll not be like all tools will be down.
Not be able to get anything done.
Not be able to get anything done then. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I think that
that's cool.
I'd recommend it.
That's not what I thought this movie was going to be. Actually, I'm surprised to hear it's kind of like this. I don't want to call it upbeat because you said there are some sort of down moments in it, but this kind of underdog story. It's definitely on my list of things to watch. There's a bunch coming out in the next few weeks actually on Netflix, as well as on other streaming services that I've got my eye on. And in that vein, I'm going to go for my first one, which is also a 2021 release. Although technically it debuted at Toronto International Film Festival back in September.
Which you don't count,
year,
we know that.
No, it needs to get a theatrical release to count for me. Theatrical release. It needs to get a wide release rather than just festivals. But this is Penguin Bloom, which also came out on Netflix I think, internationally. I think it came out on the 21st of January. But it's basically... It's Naomi Watts and Andrew Lincoln playing a couple who the wife is like kind of a very outdoorsy type, and she suffers an accident which leaves her paralyzed from kind of the middle of her back down, and it's about her kind of rehabilitation. It's I've not seen anything from this director before. It's a guy, I'm hopefully not going to butcher his name, but I think it's Glendon Even or Ifan. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it's this movie caught me by surprise actually, because when you describe, I'm a fan of like an uplifting movie. When you describe to me the premise of a movie, which is essentially that this woman is paralyzed and she discovers her lust for life again through caring for a young bird that her children bring into the family home. To me, that sounds like it could go badly wrong as a premise. Like the very premise is overly sentimental already before we even get into the part where they make a movie out of it. But it's beautifully shot. The cinematographer, whose name I haven't got down, which is bad of me, but the cinematographer has this brilliant way of supporting the themes of the movie, which is essentially Naomi Watts' character wanting to sort of get back to nature in some way and being kind of caged in this broken body, I guess. And the way the sort of outdoors shots are portrayed with this kind of like sun-dappled sunset, always appearance, always like prominent throughout it, really supports that theme. And then the performances of Naomi Watts and Andrew Lincoln are fantastic. I think Andrew Lincoln, I haven't seen him in that much stuff, so I feel like he's just been in The Walking Dead for 30 years.
He's been tied up in the contract of that.
Yeah, he was in Teachers. I remember him in Teachers back in like the early 2000s, and then he was in Love Actually. No, He was in
Yeah,
Love Actually,
he was,
wasn't he?
yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't see that until last year, and then he was just Walking Dead for 50 years until this basically. But he's making up for lost time because he's brilliant. Naomi Watts is brilliant. There's some great supporting performances, and the bird metaphor itself, it could be tiresome, but it really isn't. Like, it got me on board. You've got this
I can't
young,
even, to be honest with you, the whole bird thing, I can't even really imagine what's going on with that. It's like they rescue the bird, and as the bird sort of gets better,
like she's basically
life, yeah.
well, she basically like reject her I think it's her oldest son kind of holds himself responsible for her accident because he takes her up to a roof and she falls through a dodgy railing. And he discovers this, I think it's a magpie, this baby magpie, and brings it home. And she's initially like, "Oh, get that bird out of here." She's, sick of life. She doesn't want to see anyone. And wouldn't you know it, one day the oldest son has to leave it in her care. And I'll tell you what, we've got a new star on our hands in the magpie that plays Penguin, because what a cheeky young fella he is. Like, the things he gets up to, and I think it does, unless it's really good CGI, it does legitimately strike me as an actual bird doing these things. I don't know how they did it. But it is very uplifting. And the one other thing I will say about it is there are kind of elements in the presentation which didn't really need to be there and elevate it above like the kind of genre trappings. So I don't know if you remember, in Get Out, where when spoilers for Get Out for anyone who hasn't seen it,
he goes in.
Yeah, he kind of sinks into that like black place, and that kind of thing. It didn't really need to be in that film, and the fact that Jordan Peele thought to do that is a sign of a really inventive mind operating as a director. And this has some similar stuff to that, where there are dream sequences shot where Naomi Watts is kind of strapped to her wheelchair and kind of submerged in this abyss of water, and it really reminded me of that. And it was a really interesting presentation. Penguin Bloom, another good movie, well worth checking out if you're in the mood for something that's kind of uplifting and inspirational and quite surprising given how trite this could have potentially been.
That's awesome. And if you like Naomi Watts, tune in next week to the Best Movie Podcast Ever, where we'll be talking about monster films.
Oh yeah. I didn't even remember that was her. I'm not going to say what film it is. You're going to have to tune in next week to find that out. But I was watching Penguin Blue with my partner, and she was like, "Oh yeah, Naomi Watts was in that," and I was like, "That can't be true," but it is.
Naomi Watts may or may not have been in a particular project that my wife was working on, which has since been cancelled. That's all I'll say.
Oh really?
I didn't sign the NDA.
I'm trying to think what that is. I'm not anything I'll reveal at all.
A cancelled project in Belfast. I'm sure the comments will get on it. You know what I mean? Right. Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah. Penguin Bloom sounds good. Okay. So I'm going to go to one that I don't have. I've got a bit to say about, but not too much. But I just think it's interesting. I wanted to watch it. Right.
Okay.
So I watched Sagebrush Trail, aka An Innocent Man. It's got two titles for some reason, and that is a critically unacclaimed John Wayne Western from 1933.
An Innocent Man? I don't think I know this at all.
Basically, this is like really old John Wayne when he was very young, right? And
wow.
Yeah, so An Innocent Man, it was only an hour long, and I thought, you know what? I've seen a lot of John Wayne when he was sort of in his old, sort of Genghis Khan days, but
that's the performance you go to. Genghis Khan, racist ass performance.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I wanted to see what he was like as a young man, and I was impressed with him. If I'm honest with you, not in general. His acting was the same. Let's be honest, but
I mean that's a man. When you think about being typecast, John Wayne's who you think of.
I was watching this right, and I turned to Emer and I said, "This is 1933. This man was doing nothing but westerns for like 30 or 40 years. Like, what the hell?" But
can you see like the career? Like, because I mean, the earliest start of John Wayne stuff I've seen is probably like Stagecoach or something, which I think
Stagecoach was like 39, 38.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm assuming this is like that, where you can see the charisma and like that kind of natural magnetism that made him such a star.
Yeah, no, you can see it definitely. I actually watched the colorized version of this. So on Amazon it was there. I didn't watch the black and white one. So it was a bit interesting in a way because certain frames look like cartoons. You know what I mean? The way they color these old films in. But it was basically, I don't even, it's a John Wayne West. I don't really need to even tell you the storyline, right? He plays a character called John Brandt, and he goes undercover as a guy called Smith because he's running away from the law, and then hijinks occur. Like it's I don't need to go in too much into it, but the way it was, I was very impressed by a certain element of John Wayne because what you don't see from him in later years is seeing this early performance. He was I don't know his background in terms of where he came from, where he grew up. I'm assuming he was basically like a rancher, right? That's what I assume. That's what I assume from him, even though he's probably from a big city or something, right? Yeah. But it looked like he was so adept at horse riding, and he was so adept at like running and just jumping onto a horse, and like the style of filmmaking back then, it very much was. I looked at his IMDb page. He did so many films. Like there's something like nine films a year or something, and I'm thinking, geez, back in these days, they literally just were like shot it once and like got it, just move it on, got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know who produced this. I'm just trying to find it, but this was before the collapse of the studio system, so they were just churning this stuff out. They're like, we've got our star, we've got our director, Western, just keep making these over and over again, and he stood the test of time. Say what you will about John Wayne movies, but that him as an actor and as a character, you always knew what you're going to get with him.
Yeah, exactly. And like he was doing all the horse riding too. Like he was like jumping on a horse from standing. He was like riding a horse while dragging another one along. Like they were in a stagecoach, and then he climbed down onto a horse, unbuckled it, and rode away. He had this thing where there was two horses that he unbuckled from a stagecoach, and the stagecoach was gone, but he was standing on the bit of leather or whatever that were holding the horses, and he was like riding these two horses like he was like with huskies in the Arctic, which is really cool. There was also a little moment in the film which I thought was really interesting. He was hiding under the water from the law, and he was like breathing through a little reed, right? The classic trick, right?
Oh yeah,
and the way they shot it was really interesting to me because they actually just had him in like a big tank of water, right, with like grass or rocks on either side of the glass. And then they were filming him in the tank of water with an angle on it, and it was as if he was under the water, like he was. They were filming just through the side of the tank, and he was swimming through the water, and he was underneath, and it made him look like he was underwater. But because the cameras were so bad, and because it was so old, it actually really sold that he was underwater. Whereas these days you shoot it with a high definition camera, it was like, well, you're just literally in a tank, But
you're not fooling anyone.
But it sold it back then. Yeah, and like lots of like the same sound of a punch every time. Like load of that stuff. You know what you're getting. But I just thought it was really interesting.
Lots of shooting, lots of punching people.
Yeah.
Probably John Wayne saying "saddle up" at some point. Like that's.
I'm sure. I didn't catch it, but 100%. Yeah. There's a stagecoach robbery in it. Like, what else could you want?
Textbook. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I watched.
No, that's fascinating. I've not seen that movie. I've not seen any of that. That director doesn't ring a bell to me. That Armand Schaefer. To be honest, most of the sort of 30s and 40s westerns I've seen are all John Ford stuff because he's like the archetypal early western director. But that sounds great. I mean, and if you look at like this is all I know about this movie based on what I've just searched up on it, but if you actually look at the IMDb like kind of film poster, John Wayne's name is bigger than the title of the film, which
even at that time.
In 1933, that surprises me, but hell, I guess he was a big deal even then.
Like he was a legend the whole way through, like mental.
Yeah, I mean, and he stayed a legend as well. I don't think there was really any down. I guess maybe. The sort of True Grit or prior to True Grit, like when his style of western went out of fashion a little bit, but he stayed pretty relevant all the way up till he stopped making movies. This actually leads quite nicely into my next film because I've got to talk about this one. It's a western that I'm going to talk about as well. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. That I have bought on Blu-ray probably about 6 months ago and finally got around to watching because I've always seen it on DVDs and whatnot before. And that is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is... It's an interesting... I mean, I love this movie because it's essentially a romantic comedy that is also a Western. and I think it exists in this really interesting kind of crossroads for westerns as a genre. So it came out in 1969. So if you like it, this is probably a bit arbitrary as a way of describing this, but you could kind of make the argument that this is like the end of the western as like a main event genre. Like the 60s was kind of the last hurrah for it. You did get stuff after that as well, but the 60s was really the last time the western was massive. And the crossroads basically went in two directions. One direction leads you to things like Unforgiven in the 90s, where it gets very dark and very introspective and very grim. And this other direction, which I kind of wish westerns had gone in, and I don't think they really did, is essentially a romantic comedy, but it's about bank robbers. But this is such a wonderful movie. The lead performances from Paul Newman and Robert Redford are as cool as you like. They got together again in, I think it's called The Hustle. It was another George Roy Hill. This director basically got them together again to be Card Sharks. I think it's called The Hustle. I haven't seen it. But they're just phenomenal. They're so charming. It works so well tonally. Like, it starts off as like a pure comedy where they're just robbing banks. Then it turns into like this thriller where they're being pursued by a posse for what feels like a full hour. Then they go to Bolivia and it seems like things are going to work out again. And then it doesn't end up super well. One of the most iconic endings of a film I think I've ever seen. It's got a lovely score from Burt Bacharach, which is part of what makes it so kind of tonally interesting, and so like it really plays with the genre tropes, because it's like, well, this movie was made in 1969. We could go for like genre appropriate music, but fuck it, we're just gonna get Burt Bacharach to make like rom-com songs of this, and they just don't care, and it works so well. Paul Newman riding a bike and trying to seduce. They basically both love the same woman, and he's not really trying to seduce her. He's just like kind of trying to entertain her. And Burt Bacharach is playing in the background. The famous "Raindrops Are Falling on My Head."
Yeah.
But yeah, I love this film so much, and it's still as good today as it was the first time I saw it.
Awesome. I've actually never seen this film. I really want to watch it, and I know I've seen like there's a Northern Irish film called Mickey, Beau and Me, about two boys, one from the Catholic community, one from the Protestant community, coming together and being friends, and they go and see this film in the cinema, and like the son, this is a big sort of moment of that film. So I should really see it. I haven't seen it. I know it's really good. Well, I've heard it's really good. I'll make a judgment when I see it. But when you said Burt Bacharach there, oh my god!
Are you thinking of Austin Powers too?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Burt Bacharach.
That song is good as well. I don't know what that was original. It's weird, actually. I'm getting Baader-Meinhof complex from this, because I talked to someone else not a week ago about Burt Bacharach for some reason before I even watched this movie again. I don't know why Burt Bacharach has been coming up so much in my life, but yeah, that moment in Austin Powers 2 is classic. Elvis Costello and Burt Bacharach singing "I'll Never Fall in Love Again," while Austin and I can't remember Heather Graham's character's name.
Neither can I.
It'll be something filthy.
Yeah,
yeah.
But Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, yeah, definitely a classic. Right, well, we stay in the Western then.
Oh wow, we got 3 for 3 here.
Yeah, well, mine's kind of a Western. It is a Western.
Okay.
It is a Western, but it's
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah, so you might say it's the most Western, and that is 1999's classic. I don't use the word classic very often, but it is a classic. I think
I know what this is.
Wild Wild West.
Wicked Wild.
Yeah.
Wicked Wild.
Oh,
Knew it.
God. The Wild Wild West. Right, so it's directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, starring Will Smith, Kevin Kline. I tell you what, straight out the bat, I feel sorry for Kevin Kline. I feel sorry for Kevin Kline.
Having circles acted around him.
No, yes, basically. Because Will Smith was plastered everywhere for this. He did the song for it. It was like the Will Smith...
this was like the Will Smith coming out party. Because he'd done Men in Black, and like Men in Black was a big deal. But I feel like this was like, right, Will Smith is being an actor now.
Exactly. But the thing is, though, this is a buddy film. Like, it's a buddy film about Kevin Kline's character, who I will tell you his name is called Artemus Gordon. I couldn't remember the Artemus.
Isn't he playing like a future president in this? Like, he changes his name or something.
No, so Artemus Gordon, who's played by Kevin Kline, is he's an agent, a special agent, who goes undercover in different forms. Like, so he'll dress up as a woman or dress up as this. And there's a particular scene where he dresses up as President Ulysses S. Grant.
Okay,
but the funny thing about it is he because Will Smith goes into the office and starts talking to the president, and you find out it's actually Kevin Kline. But then the president walks in, and the president's also played by Kevin Kline.
Oh yeah, okay, that's what I think. That's probably what I'm thinking of. There, it's been a while since I've seen Wild Wild West, to be honest.
I'm gonna be honest with you, Conrad. I feel dirty. I feel dirty admitting this. You might say I feel as dirty as a cowboy in the Old West. I really enjoyed watching this again. I think I like this more watching it now than I did when I watched it when I was 10 years old. Like, because I'm watching it from
if you want to see Kenneth Branagh operate, first off, Dr. Lovelace, I would put that in the top 5 Kenneth Branagh roles of all time. Like, if you want to see a man who was once touted as like the great British thespian to like take over the mantle of Laurence Olivier, chew as much scenery as he physically can, Dr. Lovelace is the role for you.
I tell you what, it was nonsensical. The designers went mad. Like, I think this had like a big part in, if not, was a big ode to the steampunk movement. It's basically
steampunk spiders.
Steampunk spiders. It's really, really interesting. Now, I will say so basically, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's basically a story of 2 agents. Will Smith plays, I think it's literally West.
Jim West.
Yeah, Jim West. So Will Smith plays Jim West. Kevin Kline plays Artemis Gordon, and they are sort of the classic opposites attract. You know, the buddy. Yeah. It's like basically Buzz and Woody from Toy Story. The buddies who go on a journey together and eventually come around to each other and all that sort of thing. But basically, there's a crazy guy who played by Kenneth Branagh called Dr. Arliss Lovelace, and he wants to take over the United States.
I can't remember what his actual why.
His literal plan is to take over the United. In fact, there's a funny part where he's laying out his plan, and he's got a whole map of what's going to happen. He's like, this side can go back to the British. This side can go to Mexico, and he goes, and then he's literally got like a third of the country, and it says Loveless Land, and he says, and I'll take this slice to retire on.
It's like, do you remember? Have you ever seen Street Fighter the movie?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, there's like basically there's a bit in that where like M. Bison outlines his plan for world domination, and he's talking about like Bison dollars and the exchange rate for Bison dollars and how much ass it's going to kick because he's going to kidnap the Queen and force the British to give him like a really favorable exchange rate between the pound and the Bison dollar. And it's that kind of level of plan where it's just like I feel like the logistics of this aren't going to work, Dr. Lovelace, to be honest. Like, I feel like there's a lot more administration involved in this than you're thinking.
Yeah, and I know he has a giant spider, but is literally kidnapping the president mean that you could redraw the state's lines?
And like, I'll give him, the giant spider is terrifying and devastating, but I mean, I feel like if you leverage the entire United States military against one giant spider, they would win. They just blow the shit out of it with artillery. It's not... It's a giant spider. It's not like Thanos's Infinity Gauntlet. Like it can still be made of metal and can be blown up.
Yeah. So it's a big old rip and yarn. It's good fun. I will say there's a strange obviously this and I will say people who haven't seen this, it's very not well received. It was a huge flop, maybe one of the biggest flops of all time. But when you watch it now, looking back on it, you can appreciate it almost as like a time capsule of someone's idea that they thought was a good idea. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's a relic of a simpler time when we could just be like, you know what, Will Smith's going to make a Western. It's going to be steampunk, and it's going to be an original thing, I guess, and it's going to be awful. But God bless them, they tried. Yeah, they swung for the fences tried. On this one.
I will say as well, there was a strange subplot going on. Not really a subplot, really. It was actually more of the characterization of Will Smith's character. It was kind of like a Django Unchained thing. Honestly.
Okay.
Honestly, because like every single character who wasn't like a main character, the bad guy main characters were also mentioning it. They all mentioned the color of his skin. They all obviously, they're trying to be realistic at the time, but also in this type of film where it's like a comedy thing, they keep referencing slavery. They were gonna literally lynch him at one point.
Does he shoot anyone and say the D is silent, and then they see his name spelt out and it's spelled DJIM? Like West.
No. Not that similar to Django, but it's really interesting. Like, so there's a lot of Kenneth Branagh, who's the real bad guy. Like, don't get me wrong, they're trying to make him as bad as bad can be. So when he's referencing and putting down Will Smith for his race, it kind of, although maybe they wouldn't make those such overt, put downs of a black man in a lead role these days, especially in a film like this. I think if you're doing a realistic thing like 12 Years a Slave or something, you would do that because you're trying to show the realistic nature of the time. Because I think the stat is actually there's something like 25% of cowboys were actually black, which is not a stat people hear very often.
A shitload of them were Hispanic as well.
Exactly, yeah. So
like Mexicans made up a huge
the interesting thing was though, I don't think I saw another black man in this whole film except for Will Smith. They thought they'd done their job having him. But basically, this is the weird thing, right? So, okay, maybe you can settle the fact that the bad guy is the one being racist. Okay, the bad guy. But whenever the bad guy, Kenneth Branagh, would put down Will Smith about slavery and everything like this, Will Smith would bounce back, and this really is of the time, and we could not do this anymore. Will Smith would come back and just have an onslaught of insults about how Kenneth Branagh's character is in a wheelchair.
Oh, great. I don't remember any of that. That sounds bad.
I think the word stomp the word stomp was used.
Oh. Was it referencing the musical?
No.
Okay.
No. He wasn't a musical fan, this character. But like that's what I mean. Like that was a bit strange. It was a bit strange. It kept coming back. It was sort of because maybe that was like the sort of harsh comedy of the time. But I think
it's just lazy characterization as well, isn't it? It's like, okay, this character, how do we like immediately signpost this character as a bad guy? I don't know, racism, and then and what can we get away with James West saying like, I don't know, being ableist because this guy is a dick, so you're allowed to be ableist to him. And as you say, that's very much a symptom of the time in which this was made, I think.
Exactly. So if you ignore that, it's a rip and yarn with a load of good fun on it. I will say as well, at the end of like the Django Unchained sort of storyline in it is that you actually like Jim West. It's not the end of the storyline, sorry, but I'm explaining why it is like that. Jim West, you find out that his family has actually died because of an attack on a particular village that his family's from, and Dr. Lovelace was involved in that. So it literally is like, this is Django Unchained, he's Django, and Lovelace is Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like
in a buddy film. Like, I suppose Django's kind of like a buddy thing too, because you've got what do you call him?
What's his name? It's not Hans
Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, Christoph
Waltz and Jamie Foxx. So yeah, it's basically Django Unchained is a remake of this film, basically, without the giant spiders.
Quentin Tarantino needs to get some original ideas.
Anyway, that's Wild Wild West. Much better than I remembered. I think I probably put it this way: not the best film in the world. I'll watch it again in the next 10 years.
Yep. Okay. Well, yeah. Jim West. Remember the name. I can't remember the rest of that song. The only line I remember from that song is "Don't let me catch your hand where your hip be at," which is a great line.
Wild Wild West.
Yeah. Wicked. Whatever happened to Cisco? Where did he go? But
he went to the Wild Wild West, probably.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to. How many do I have left? I've got 2 left. So I'm going to do one of mine now. This is not a Western in any way, shape, or form.
No, so we're not going to have the streak keep going.
But, I mean, you could make the argument that it's about some cowboys of the financial type.
Oh,
this was, I watched this in honor of the fact that all that GameStop share stuff was going on. And I was like, you know what this puts me in the mood for? And that is Adam McKay's The Big Short, which I was like, you know what, that's a really good movie. Yeah, and I Adam McKay, I go back and forth on as a director. Like, obviously, like Anchorman and like Step Brothers. And
he's got his 2 types of film he makes.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got his comedies, and he's got his. I'm trying to do my editing stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is really compelling. It's still as compelling as it was when I first watched it, particularly for a movie that's subject matter is something that I know basically nothing about. Like my approach to investing is to throw money into an investment ISA and be like, I don't know, you guys deal with it. I don't want to do it. I don't know what I'm doing. And it does, I've heard like kind of criticism of it that it does kind of hold its audience's hand a little bit to lead them to the compelling jumps forward in the narrative. But I think that works really well.
It does.
And I think it's kind of like aided as well by having such a good ensemble cast. I think it's kind of typical of Adam McKay's films that the writing of his characters is very two-dimensional, and I think that's partially a problem of the fact that there are so many characters in this that they don't really have time to have more than one dimension or two dimensions, I guess. But those two dimensions for most of his characters are really good. Like Ryan Gosling's character is really funny. Steve Carell gets probably the most meat in terms of character development, even though it's not much, but his character is really well realized, and Christian Bale as well is pretty good. So yeah, I really like this movie. It's still really good, and it's never been more relevant than it is right now.
Yeah, like I've seen this film as well. I view this, obviously it's obvious why, but I view this film as like a double bill to Vice, which is Adam McKay's one we talked about a few weeks ago. It's got the same sort of style, in the same way in Vice where they explain political things through taking a break from the narrative. Like, I think in The Big Short, there's a really awesome scene where to explain, they're like, this stuff's really complicated. You know, like the narrator goes, this stuff's really complicated. So to explain it, here's Margot Robbie in a jacuzzi. And she just literally sits there drinking champagne, explaining how the stock market works. It's really interesting.
They return to it later with Sienna Miller playing blackjack with an economics professor from Harvard or Yale or something. And it is, I mean, it seems dumb, but it's really memorable and it does work. So, you know.
Yeah, I really like that style. It's like, it's something that I've not really seen before. It's almost like what I kind of refer to as kind of like the YouTube film. Like, so, like, Adam McKay has been inspired by this sort of editing style. And, like, also in Lucy, which we talked about, about a month ago, which was Luc Besson's film. They cut away to pictures and video like they're making a YouTube video, their first YouTube video. You know what I mean? Like where they're like they're narrating over just pictures they found on Google. You know what I mean? I find that a really interesting thing to put in a feature film. But it works. It works though. But I find it very interesting. It's like the first thing you learn in editing software. You know what I mean? It's like they're using the skills that they first learned, but they're still using it when they're making multi-million-dollar films.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it works, why get away from it? But I mean, and I think that is it is kind of really, really snappily edited. I think Adam McKay is a limited filmmaker, but within his limits, he is very good at, or he can be very good at what he does. And I think this is a great example of that, where it's like, you know what, we're gonna have really good in fact, actually, I say really good character actors. It's really leading men because it's Christian Bale, Ryan Gosling, and Steve Carell who are all leads. But they're kind of playing character actors because it's they're filling character actor roles because it's an ensemble cast, and for that reason, like his scripts, it's not his script, but the script of this movie can come to the front and it doesn't need to do too much in terms of like deep characterization. It's just like, you be funny, you be the damaged one, and you be the one who's a little bit off the wall, and you're good enough actors to make those characters work with the time allotted to you. Yeah,
no, it's great. And like these sort of films, when it all comes together, because they've got all those different tracks being run, when they all actually do come together at the end, it's always great. Awesome. Okay, my last film is a documentary. My first documentary that I've watched for this podcast. I am a lover of documentary, I'm honest with you. And I was kind of waiting for Konrad to watch a documentary first. He watched Maradona. He watched Diego Maradona. So once he watched it, I was like, yes, I have permission. All right. So now next week I'll have five monster documentaries next week. But
nice.
So basically, I watched a Netflix documentary called Three Identical Strangers.
This is good.
Have you seen it?
I have seen this, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. So basically the setup, we're not going to spoil anything, but the setup basically is that there's three fellas who, when they're 19 years old, they find out that they're triplets, and they got separated at birth, and they're all they've all been adopted by different parents, and then sort of the story goes, and after we found this out, and it was like they were all together after like 10 minutes, and I turned to Emer, I said, what is this film going to be about?
Yeah, it's not what you think it's about. Like when you see that premise, it's like, well, obviously this is going to be about the unlikely journey these triplets went through to discover that they had brothers. But it ain't about that.
It is not about that. It is. No. It goes. It's like a rabbit hole. You know, you go down the rabbit hole as you go. And literally, I paused it, and it was like, I was like, already like after half an hour, I was like, so much has happened. How long's left? And it's like, I'm like, Jesus, we're only half an hour in, and 20 minutes ago I was thinking, geez, we've just finished the show, after 10 minutes you're just like, well, we know everything now.
Yeah, the last hour is just them playing football in the back garden with like upbeat music playing in the background.
Exactly. So the style of the documentary is so documentaries come in different styles. This one comes in the style of they do reenact things. So some documentaries don't do this. This one obviously didn't have enough footage to create the documentary like Maradona would have. But so that they actually reenact with actors while the real people are talking in their interviews, that you'll see sort of things happening as if it was real. Now, I don't always like that in documentaries, I'm going to be honest with you. It does work in this, and it doesn't come across as cheesy. It doesn't really, like, they never have the actors speaking, you know what I mean? Like, they don't actually reenact scenes. So it doesn't come across badly. It actually comes across very, very well. I also think that the director makes a really good choice of licensed music. So there's particular moments in the film where, you've had like 10-15 minutes of emotional dialogue from the interviewees, and then all of a sudden they'll just like, and it was the 80s, man, and it'll like pop into a licensed music, and it'll just give you a little montage of the 80s. I will say, I was watching this with Emma, right? And like in this documentary, it is uttered, sex, drugs, rock and roll. It was the 80s, man. I just want to say to you, Conrad, I've heard that exact phrase said for every decade from the 60s on. It was the 60s, man. It was the 70s, man. It was the 90s, man. Like
it's basically just like like a phrase used to describe a period of hedonism in your own life.
Yeah, everyone thinks that their early 20s was the only time the world was rocking.
Yeah, it was the only time anyone took drugs and had sex and drank a lot was when you were doing it, which as I get older, I become acutely aware that was not the case.
Yeah, exactly. It was the 2010s, man.
If you read about what was going on in Germany during like the 20s, like there was
the 1920s. Like, jeez, don't worry, I've seen it. I've seen Babylon Berlin.
Oh well, yeah, there you go. Like they were all about drugs and sex and alcohol, so, and I'm assuming in other parts of Europe as well. So these guys unfortunately were not the ones to invent drug taking as much as they might think so.
Like to give a little hint into sort of this doesn't tell you anywhere where it goes, but after they get together, they have a great time, we'll say. And I just wanted to point out,
might say too good a time,
but it's really compelling. It's really compelling. It's worth watching. It's the story does not get boring the whole way through. Like every part of the story is compelling.
It's one of those documentaries where the narrative kind of speaks for itself to a certain extent, and I feel like the documentarian, I can't actually remember the name of the person who made it, but
Tim Wardle.
Yeah, I feel like they're not having to massage the narrative too much to get it to tell the story they want, which is normally the sign of a good documentary in my
exactly.
eyes.
And I'm not trying to spoil anything, but I'm going to say something now for the next 20 seconds, which might be viewed as a spoiler, but might not be. This documentary suffers from what a lot of documentaries, in my opinion, suffer from. And that's the fact that when you've got all these characters speaking at their current age, when there's one missing, you know where it's going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a sad truth, and they couldn't really get around that. But it's just the fact of the matter. You'd have to be stupid not to know where it's going, But it makes you feel sad in the documentary before you actually should be feeling sad, if you know what I mean, because you put it together. Also, I'll end it on saying this: we open it with one of the brothers called Bobby before they realize who they are and all that sort of thing. He's going to university for the first time, and he's like, I was going to university, and he's like talking like this, and he's like, so I got in my car. It had burgundy sides, green bonnet, right? He's explaining it. He goes, it was called Old Bitch. And I'm like, right, this is what we're doing. We're into this documentary. It was like such a strong start with this really big character. He called his car Old Bitch.
Old Bitch. It's like George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, this was not written. This is a documentary. His car was called Old Bitch.
I mean, George R.R. Martin seemed to think it was clever to have one of the Ironborn call a ship Sea Bitch in his fantasy novel. So the gloves are off as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going to judge this young man for calling his car the Old Bitch.
No, I'm judging him in the positive direction.
Yeah. Sounds like a great guy.
I just love the fact that he's sitting there in his 50s or 60s, still loving the choice.
Yeah, still regaling people. Yeah. What a choice that was.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it is a good movie though. I enjoyed it. As I kind of said when we talked about Diego Maradona. Another name that movie. I can never remember if it's just his first name or the both. Documentaries need to be very good to keep me going, because if I can see the strings of the documentarian at all, I'm like, I don't like this. And this one, totally kept me enraptured for the full length of the movie, which is for the duration. Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna do two here. My last one is just a and finally kind of thing. Cool. The first one I'm going to talk about, it's not a documentary. It's a sequel to a movie that I did very much like, and I watched it because another sequel is coming out in about a week's time, and that is To All the Boys, P.S. I Love You. It's a sequel to All the Boys I've Loved Before, and is the one before, what's it called? To All the Boys, Always and Forever. So it's a rom-com. Some people, like, I haven't really mentioned many rom-coms, to be honest, on this up until this point. I do like a good rom-com, and To All the Boys I've Loved Before is actually, it's very, like, the central performance of Lana Condor is really charming and really funny in the first one, and that helps it a lot, and it's kind of elevated by some really interesting kind of presentational production design elements. Like, it's really colorful, it's really bright, and it's shot in this kind of really odd, like, esoteric kind of way that I enjoyed, and there is a bit of that in this, but unfortunately, with To All the Boys, P.S. I Love You, the original director, I believe, was Susan Johnson. Yeah, I think it was Susan Johnson, left and was replaced on this film by the cinematographer from the first film, whose name is Michael Fimagnari, I think. And
that's interesting.
It loses something in that. And I mean, and I don't want to put it all on his shoulders, because I think this movie also suffers from the problem a lot of rom-coms suffer from when they try and make a sequel, which is that you have the big kind of romantic climax of the first movie, and it's like, okay, how do we do that again?
How do we reset it?
Yeah, and unfortunately the answer is, well, we just kind of do the same thing but put it in a different setting with maybe some different characters, and you're always going to suffer from diminishing returns when that's all you have. And unfortunately that is all this has. It's not the worst movie in the world by any stretch of the imagination. As I say, Lana Condor is still very, very charming and very funny, and there are decent moments in it, but it is essentially just a retreading of the first movie. So I'm hopeful that the third one ups the game a bit. I don't think it will, because I think it's Michael Fimagnari again, but the first one is still well worth watching. So if you're in the mood for a decent rom-com, To All the Boys I've Loved Before is very fun and enjoyable.
That's really interesting. I've seen that film on there before. I'm not someone to look at like what's very clearly, like, let's be honest. The target market of this is maybe old teens. Maybe, I'm not quite sure. But like, I'll watch film no matter what the target market is. I haven't seen this though. But I find that very interesting. Whenever the director left, that the cinematographer became the director. When has that happened before? That's a very strange choice.
I don't know if there's a reason for it. I mean, and I'm not against cinematographers stepping into directing, because normally what that ends up with is a really nice looking movie. But it's weird in this that this movie looks worse than the first one, which I guess means like the Michael Fimagnari didn't have enough time to do the cinematography and had to hand it off to the actual cinematographer, and the end result was diminishing quality. But yeah, it's quite uncommon from my knowledge for a director to leave a project and for the cinematographer to step in and do it. And
it's coming out. It's coming out next, like, sort of soon, is it? The next one,
12th of February, I think.
That's interesting. So, like, they're releasing one a year.
Yeah, I cannot believe the turnaround on that. Like, literally, it's less than a year since this came out to the release of the next one.
It must be like it's sort of like making a TV show, but they're making just a film instead of making 8 episodes. It's interesting because, or maybe they were all shot like The Hobbit. You know, like they were shot.
Yeah, all shot them all together. Yeah, because the actors are aging, so they're like, we got to get them when they're good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, you know, I'm interested in that. I might watch it, give the first one a go and see what I think.
The first one is worth seeing. It's not, you know, it's not mind blowing, but it's good. It's funny and charming, and the central romance is quite believable. It's, you know, it's heartwarming, I'll say.
Is there a sort of a trope in there of her writing letters? Is that why it's called To All the Boys?
Yeah. So basically, the central premise of the first one is she wrote a bunch. I think she wrote 5 letters to boys she had crushes on when she was like 10. and then her younger sister mails them accidentally when I think she's like 16.
Right.
And they go to various boys, but one of the boys is someone that is currently like the lacrosse playing hunk of her high school, and he's having his own relationship problems, and he ends up saying, well, listen, if you like me, why don't we pretend to be in a relationship to make my current girlfriend jealous? And wouldn't you know it, they end up falling in love. That is a fairly well-run territory. I don't think it's really doing anything new, but like the kind of presentation of it is really nice, and the performance of Lana Condor is really good, so it's worth checking out.
Does she wear glasses up until the transition though? Up until the montage?
She doesn't wear glasses. She's actually really well dressed. She's got a really cool sense of style, that character. I can't remember if she's bookish up until a point. I don't think she is. I think she's just kind of like one of those kids who's like, oh, she's such a nerd and an outsider. It's like, there's no way this incredibly attractive and really well dressed like 17-year-old is an outsider in this school. I don't believe it for one moment. But you know, Lana Condor's like, her performance is great, so it's well worth seeing the first one. Second one, I wouldn't really recommend, and the third one, I'm a bit skeptical about, but we shall see. It will probably come up in a movie diary in a couple of weeks' time, I imagine.
Okay, awesome. Unless it's not the cream that rises to the top.
No, if you don't ever hear me mention this series again, you'll know it was just thrown out with the rest of the shitty milk and didn't make it into the cream.
While we're in the cream metaphor, jeez, that reminds me of what do you call it? Catch Me If You Can. Have you seen that?
I have. I don't remember the cream bit.
Christopher Walken. That's his little go-to metaphor. He's like, 2 mice fall in a bucket of cream. 1 mouse, he gives up and he drowns, but the other mouse, he keeps trying and trying, and eventually he turns that cream into butter, and he crawls out. Yeah, classic quote in my house.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that movie for a long time, so it like the cream metaphor has slipped my mind, but it's very appropriate for what we're doing.
You are that second mouse. You are that second mouse. You're bringing the cream to us.
I will drink that cream until it's butter.
Churn.
Churn that
You'll
cream.
Just drink the cream, and then you survive because you just drink it all. Yeah,
just like I would just be dead at the bottom of an empty bucket. It'd be like, well, obviously he's poisoned himself by drinking all that cream.
Fair enough.
Speaking of cream, I'm going to just mention this very quickly because it was actually one of our listeners in last week's comments that recommended this movie to me. I can't remember who you were. If it was you, make yourself known in the comments and I will respond to you and say thank you. This is a movie on Netflix. It's called Ruben Brandt Collector. It's a Hungarian animation from 2018. And I'm normally quite bad about, as you well know, Anthony, when someone recommends something to me, it normally takes me about a decade to get around to actually watching it. But in this case, I was looking for something to watch on Netflix. I remembered this recommendation. I went and checked it out, and it is really beautiful animation, really, really cool. The plot itself is pretty, I don't want to say straightforward, but it's essentially a kind of a heisty kind of movie.
What's it called again?
Ruben Brandt, Collector.
Cool.
But the animation style is fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. It's so stylish and so slick. And I'd love to see and actually also great use of licensed music. Talking about licensed music earlier in the episode. But yeah, I just wanted to give this a shout out because it was a really good recommendation.
Awesome. Yeah. I might check that out. Ema loves animation. Well, so do I. But
yeah,
Ema will be really up for watching it.
Yeah, I think you guys would probably enjoy that, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome.
But yeah, so I think that's gonna do it for us here this week on the Best Movie Podcast Ever, which leaves us as we end every show with one simple question to answer, and that is, Anthony, what is your favorite movie?
Wild Wild West.
I can't believe you've done this. My favorite movie is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. We're welcome to the best Western podcast ever. That's all we talk about here. We're the rootinest, tootinest podcast in town. Check us out next week for our themed episode on monster movies. We're going to talk about Godzilla and all sorts. I'm
getting ready. Last week I was so late with my cut. I'm getting ready.
Yeah, get ready. Prime it. Prime the cut. Prime the snapper board. Subscribe to us on YouTube, Culture Cave. Subscribe to us on podcasting apps. Best movie podcast ever. We're on all the good ones. Give us a like. Get involved in the comments. Share the show with your friends. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. Their stuff's in the link down below. Share the show with your friends. I've already said that. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
And cut.